Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Now we switch our attention to money matters. Yes, we're joined now by Dr. Richard Egbule, MFR, who is the Executive Chairman, National Salaries, Incomes and Wages Commission. He joins us from Abuja. Good morning and thank you for joining us today. Well, your agency is the one saddled with the matters relating to wages, incomes, salaries of the public sector. And we do know that labor demanding this 56,000 naira minimum wage. Many have questioned the yardstick with which some of these are fixed. Now, could you tell us, you heard the demands of labor. Is your agency looking into this?
Thank you very much. To start with, I think labor has the responsibility to make demands on behalf of workers throughout the world. When such demands are made, one should not be overly disturbed. You see, the National Salaries, Incomes and Wages Commission is not responsible entirely for fixing of the national minimum wage. It has been done in this country through what we call tripartite arrangement, in which government as a sovereign is represented, you have organized private sector, and then you have organized labor. These are the three bodies that come together to look into the issue of national minimum wage. The first time it was done, 1980, it was again done 1990, it was again done 2000, and lastly 2011. Of course, it was ready by 2010. So in between, there has been a period of 10 years for the review of the past ones. Although recently, in the last one, there were quite a number of recommendations. One of them was the issue that instead of a 10-year thing, it should be every 5 years. But that recommendation was not taken up and enacted into law. The only thing that was done was the issue of picking the figures and changing them. There are quite a number of very important recommendations in that report that was not, that were not taken. As regards the criteria for the country's review of the national minimum wage, we zeroed in on the conditions of the nation, the economic condition of the nation, the cost of living, the ability of employers to pay, and of course, views of relevant stakeholders, and of course, the ILO conventions. You see, in Nigeria, during the last one, you will recall that so many state governments, tried to say that they disowned it because they were not part of it. That's not correct. They were part of it because the state governments were represented. The organized private sector was fully represented by NECA, which is the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, the Nigerian Chamber of Commerce, Industries, and Mines and Agriculture, NASIMA, the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, then the Nigerian Small and Scale Medium Enterprises. They were all represented. And then, of course, to make sure that the figures that come up are also acceptable generally, important agencies with economic foothold are usually consulted. In the last one, CBN made an input, Revenue Mobilization Allocation and Fiscal Commission made an input, NISA made an input, and the Ministry of National Planning, of course, National Planning Commission made an input. All these were also compared with a study of what we call the unorganized private sector, which is people who engage themselves and make some money on daily basis. You like to know how much are they earning before you can foist, the issue of minimum wage.
All right. If it goes
it is clear, probably for all of who discuss minimum wage in Nigeria, to realize that minimum wage, so to speak, that is not for everybody.
All right. Let me ask this
agencies or organizations.
We hope you can hear me.
Less than 50.
Dr. Egbule, can you hear me? All right. So if it goes through that rigor or those amounts of checks before they eventually agree on the minimum wage, so why then is it that when the agreements are reached, we'll find state governors who still say, I'm afraid we can't pay?
That is the curious part of it. It's quite curious because not only were they represented, the opinions of all state governments were sought. And there are documentations of responses received from at least 16 of them, stating clearly how much they could afford as a minimum wage. And in fact, the average of responses from the states was around 21,000 at that time. So, but the argument which they canvassed on the floor of the National Economic Council was that the letters demanding such input should have been written to the executive governors. But that's strange, because letters to state governments are usually addressed to the secretary to governments, who would take a memo to their principal, the governor, and whatever decision they receive, they then turn it in.
We've raised
we had enough input from the states, and there were, and I believe it helped.
You've raised a significant point.
So for them to turn around and say
if I may come in here, you've raised a significant point. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah.
Now, you talked about the review period.
I can, yes.
Beautiful. You talked about the review period, and you said that, then it was done every 10 years. There was an agreement which was done. There was a recommendation which was given for every 5 years, but that wasn't passed into law. Are you saying that as it stands, the law is still talking about a review every 10 years? Is there a law to that effect?